Hello and welcome in, everybody. We got One Piece, chapter 1119 here with us today, and we are here to break it down, talk a little bit about it, and just have some fun. So with that being said, let's get right to it. So to kick things off this week, we start with Yamato's cover page story, volume 9, and we see kids throwing rocks at Yamato because they didn't like Kaido's reign. And this makes a lot of sense, right? Even though Yamato was not a part of Kaido's army, simply because Yamato is related to Kaido, they're throwing rocks at her. And I feel like this is pretty standard. I don't blame the kids for this, right? They don't know any better. All they know is that Kaido was a really bad guy, enslaved their families, starved them to death. So since he's gone and they can't throw rocks at him, you gotta throw rocks at the next best thing. And the next best thing would be Yamato. So yeah, I don't blame the kids for not knowing what's going on here. They don't know the nuance behind it. But I do feel like once they learn about Yamato, once they get to know her, I feel like they're going to be singing a very different tune. Funny enough, in a way, this kind of reminds me of what happened with the Kurozumi and Orochi, right? The Kurozumi had one bad ancestor who tried to kill the Shogun, and what happened? Because of that one guy, they started attacking all of the other Kurozumi members, even the ones who had nothing to do with that guy. And then eventually they gave birth to Orochi, and that is why he grew to hate the citizens of Wano. It's kind of like the same thing here, you know? Oh, Kaido's gone? Well, we're gonna mess up Yamato anyways, even though Yamato had no relations to Kaido in that regard, right? Another way you could look at this is that maybe Yamato's gonna get so annoyed that she leaves Wano, right? I mean, of course, there are a lot of people out there, myself included, who still think that Yamato will, you know, potentially run into the crew at some point later down the road. So, you know, maybe that is in the cards here because of this. You know, she's like, you know, F these kids, I'm leaving. Or hey, who knows? Maybe Yamato is actually cool with this. Because we do have to remember that back in Odin's journey, you know, his early life, nobody liked him, right? You know, every time Odin went somewhere, all the guys would hate him, make fun of him, you know, throw out mean names at him. Honestly, only the women liked Odin, and that's simply because he was a good-looking guy and he was really strong. So maybe Yamato would view this as another step in Odin's shoes. Either way though, I am just really glad that Yamato has finally left the Flower Capital. Man, she has been there for a long time, you know? So Yamato finally going out and about, exploring Wano. This is what I wanted to see. So now, on to the actual chapter, and surprisingly, we start things off with Kaku and Stussy, a pair that I quite honestly didn't think would get fleshed out to this extent. So in this chapter, we see that Stussy has indeed released Kaku from his bubble. I kind of wish we got to see how she did it, because at this point in time, we still don't know how you break the pacifista, water-infused bubbles that Vegapunk has created. And I feel like that is going to be notable come the later chapters, because we do have the Seraphim who are still trapped in their bubbles. So we get some dialogue between them, and Kaku refers back to the previous chapters. He's like, hey, Stussy, me? Your friend? Who are you kidding? We're not friends, Stussy. By the way, you should probably leave this area. You know, Rob Lucci is a really bad guy. I love him for that. I love that he's really bad. But that's not good for you. You know, he's gonna kill you on the spot. You should get the hell out of here. And then Stussy's like, but Kaku. And then he's like, just go. And then he turns away, and you can actually see him holding back tears. So you can definitely tell that he is indeed feeling some things right here. And I don't blame him, right? I mean, Stussy is your Nakama. Even though she did betray Kaku, she still stuck her neck out for him. You know, she still called up Edison and said, hey, can we let this guy go? You know, like, I don't want him to die. And it's like, damn, dude, like after all of this, they're still friends. And it's really heartwarming to see, but it's also really sad at the same time, because Stussy now has nowhere to go. She can't go back home to Marijois. The Straw Hats are about to leave. And it's like, okay, like what is Stussy going to do now? You know, I mean, I guess she could technically fly to the Thousand Sunny. She could technically fly to Elbaf and meet up with the Straw Hats later. Like, I think there's a lot of chances for Stussy to meet up with the other Vegapunks again. But will she do that? Granted though, like if she were to go somewhere else other than Elbaf with the Straw Hats, I would think that maybe she teams up with Neo Mads. Of course, I don't know why she would. Like, she's not exactly evil like Judge or Caesar, but maybe she would want to go through what the original Miss Balkans went through, right? She is a clone of her, and the original Miss Balkans was a part of Mads. So maybe she wants to follow in those footsteps, kind of like Yamato and Odin, right? Maybe Stussy takes a play out of that book, but outside of that, I don't know. She could also end up like a Bellamy type character, where after Dressrosa, he kind of just retired and started making ship flags. So maybe Stussy finds a nice retirement home or a nice village to hang out at. I think she'd even make a great fit at Sphinx Village, right? That's where the original Miss Bokkins is right now. So maybe she goes there and hangs out in Whitebeard's hometown. I feel like there's a lot of routes this could go for Stussy, and I really am wishing her the best in a weird way. You know, she's a robot, she's a creation, she never really had a purpose in life. So now I guess it's time for her to do some soul searching. As far as Kaku goes, I feel like he's just going to pick up Rob Lucci and head out of this island. I doubt he's going to try and run the gauntlet against the Straw Hats again, considering how badly it ended up last time, right? You know, Zoro is still around, Luffy is still around, Sanji's still around, like Jinbei's still here. Kaku, if he were to fight anybody from the Straw Hats, he would probably lose. So I think it's in his best interest to just get the heck out of here with his life and his good friend Rob Lucci. I will say this though, but I am really happy that Kaku took this route. I'm glad that he is shedding some tears and showing some emotion. We don't get this that often from CP0 agents, right? Rob Lucci has never really shed tears before. So I do think it's quite nice seeing Kaku show some emotion here. He's not just a killing government assassin. No. There's a heart down there somewhere, you know? So anyways, though, moving on to the next focal point of the chapter, we have Luffy and Bonney in Gear 5th, and they are laughing up a storm. The Giants are really excited that Nika is here. You know, they're like, hey, Nika, you know, we love you guys. You all are the best. The Marines, on the other hand, are really confused. They're looking at Luffy and they're like, wait, that's the bounty poster. That's him. It finally makes sense. Mars, on the other hand, though, points out that Bonney's transformation is nothing more than a fake. It is something that was created by the Toshi no Mi. And I'm glad that he acknowledges that, because it really makes me wonder what's going to happen when Mars makes it back to Marie Joie, or, you know, Warcury, or even the other Gorosei members, right? Like, will they look at Saturn and say, hey, your Toshi no Mi experimentation was a success, but in the worst possible way? You know, you technically created a second Sun God Nika. What are you doing, man? I am curious to see, though, like, what was Saturn's goal with the Toshi no Mi in the first place? Did he want somebody to mimic the Sun God Nika powers? Was it just a playful experiment? Or perhaps is there something deeper to these powers that we just don't quite know of yet? Either way, Mars ends up shooting off a fire blast breath towards Luffy, and Luffy ends up tanking this attack with his white balloon, which is pretty crazy, because just thinking back to when Luffy last took a blast attack like this, it was from Kaido, and Luffy not only was knocked pretty far away, but he also had to shake off all the burnt bits, right? So, you know, I can't help but compare those two blast breath attacks, and, you know, I'm not a great power scaler, but if I had to look at it and if I had to declare a winner, I would say Kaido's blast breath looks a lot more impressive than this. But yeah, either way though, Luffy says, hey guys, shred them, crush them, or beat them. The Gorosei just keep on coming back. They will just keep on recovering. So instead, we should send them away. And after he says that, he grabs onto Mars's wings and he asks the Straw Hats to send him flying. But here's the kicker. He doesn't say to attack Mars, he says to attack himself. Sanji and Franky just automatically go along with it, right? They don't ask any questions. They're like, okay, the captain wants us to hit him. That is what we're gonna do, right? So they rush off, and we see Sanji activate Ifrit Janbei Hell's Memories. Franky whips out a brand new attack. He whips out Strong Impact Right. And then Bonney ends up whipping out an extra large Nika Punch. And it's really cool. If I had to compare Bonney's attack to anything we've seen before, it kind of reminds me of an elephant gun or a Bajrang gun, since it is in Gear 5th. Of course, it's not as strong as those attacks because there's not like any Black Lightning or Conqueror's Haki or Ryuo behind it, but it's still really impressive that Bonney can just whip out an attack like this. Either way though, what I found pretty funny is that Bonney was like, hey guys, what the hell are we doing, right? Like, why are we attacking Luffy? But, you know, of course, Franky and Sanji are like, hey, this is our captain's orders. So while they're hitting Luffy from the back, we can actually see Dory and some of the Giants trying to put out the fire that Marcus Mars started last chapter, saying, hey, like, guys, we gotta stop dancing to the Sun God Nika tune and put out this damn fire. We gotta set sail, guys. We can dance later. Which I thought was kind of funny. I just love how all of the Giants of Elbaf seem to know about Sun God Nika, which is something we kind of have an inkling of back in Big Mom's flashback because they all participated in the Winter Solstice Festival, which celebrates the sun. But seeing it here is actually kind of funny. Seeing everybody bust out the same moveset is pretty hilarious. So, after they all hit Luffy, Luffy comments, really oddly, Luffy comments that, hey, that really hurts, guys. Like, like what you guys are doing back there, that's kind of painful. If you put haki behind it, of course it's going to hurt me, which I personally thought was a really cool add-in. Of course, everybody views Gear 5th a little bit differently. But for me, I do enjoy it a lot. But one of my main things about Gear 5th that I was always curious about was that I wondered how much damage Luffy took, or even if he felt damage in the first place while in this form. Because going back to Kaido's fight, right? Luffy took a bowl of breath, he turned into this ashened figure, he shook it off, and he just ran right back. Kaido hit him with the, Conqueror's Haki laced Kanabo, and Luffy's over here bouncing around and laughing. So I always wondered if Luffy actually felt the damage, or if he was just kind of memeing around the entire time. Same with Kizaru, right? Kizaru shot a beam down Luffy's throat, Luffy ate it, and he said, oh, that burns, oh! And it's like, okay, is Luffy making fun of Kizaru? Is he laughing like a cartoon would when they take damage? Because just going back to like Tom and Jerry, which is what Gear 5th is based off of, but in Tom and Jerry, whenever they take damage, they're like, oh, ow, ooh, and then they're normal like 2 seconds later. So I couldn't tell if Luffy actually felt any of that. So seeing Luffy, make a declaration here that haki does still hurt him, I think is a pretty nice add-in. Because, just going back to everybody I've talked to about Gear 5th before, whenever I asked people how to defeat Luffy in Gear 5th, 9 out of 10 people would just say, oh, you just have to wait until his timer runs out. So it's kind of nice seeing that, Oda's throwing in the fact that you can damage Luffy in this form into the equation, which I'm sure was pretty obvious for some of you guys here. But for me personally, I was always on the fence about it. But yeah, either way though, Luffy's being hit with haki from behind. Who's actually doing it is now coming into the equation. I've seen some people saying that this confirms that Franky does indeed have haki. Some people are wondering if Bonney has haki since her fist is blackened. But me personally, I think it could be all three of them. I think it could just be one or two. Like, it's really hard to tell. But 100% without a shadow of a doubt, we do know that Sanji has armament haki, so I think we can erase him out of the equation, right? If the haki is all just coming from one person, then it's most likely just Sanji. But the Franky and Bonney debate is something I do think is quite interesting. Franky, of course, we don't see his fist in the panel where he's attacking. We see him wind up for it, but we don't see him, like, actually hitting Luffy's body with a blackened fist. So as far as that goes, I don't think Franky is the one doing it. Mainly because Franky hasn't shown armament capabilities thus far in the series, and I do think it is kind of cool that he hasn't shown it yet either, mainly because it just goes to show how far Franky has come without needing it, right? His technology is just that good. His advancements are just that great that he doesn't need haki quite yet. But of course, it could be him. I feel like if there was somebody in the Straw Hats that I would give armament haki to, I feel like he would be top of my list personally. Outside of that though, Bonney, I think she's a solid candidate for armament haki. I mean, she's in Gear 5th. Her fist is blackened in the panel where she's about to attack and in the panel where she is attacking. And plus, she's a supernova, right? I mean, all the supernova, more or less, have shown some haki. Drake has, right? Drake, Hawkins, ooh, maybe they haven't. I don't know. The one thing working against Bonney is the fact that she's only 12 years old. So I could see people saying that that's a reason why she wouldn't have it quite yet, simply because she hasn't grown enough or because she hasn't really trained up enough. But either way, though, this is a debate that I've seen a lot of people partake in. And personally, I can't weigh in too much just because we don't really have too much context, right? All we have is Luffy saying, hey, it hurts, guys. You guys are using haki back there. What are you doing? So, that's all we really have to go off of. Could it be one of them? Could it be all of them? Could it be two of them? We don't really know. But yes, moving on though, now that Luffy has accumulated all of that damage, he takes it all and he shoves it up Marcus Mars and sends him flying, blasting off like Team Rocket, which is pretty funny, right? If we ended off at the panel where we see Marcus Mars flying away, that'd be one thing. But Oda decided to add him in on a second panel where you can actually see the star and you get the sound effect as well, which I think is a pretty nice nod to Pokemon. But yeah, man, Luffy's new move here is pretty dang cool. It's like a mixture of the balloon attack that he has in his base form combined with Tank Man in a way, right? Because he's absorbing damage and he's also pushing it all out and shoving his opponent away, kind of like a cannon. So yeah, bye-bye Marcus Mars. Hopefully he lands somewhere safely. I don't really know what's gonna happen to Marcus Mars now. Like, will he just fly back? Is he out of commission? Is he still on Egghead Island? We don't really know. Now that Marcus Mars is gone, we now have some time to settle in and chat a little bit. And Luffy says, hey, where's Nami's group? You know, where's Usopp and where's Chopper? Sanji responds by telling him that they will be on their way any second now. But that is when Atlas says that she is going. Where's she going? We don't really have a clue. She could be going to Nami's group, or she could just be going back to the island in general. Because after she says this, we get a snippet of her inner call with Lilith. And she says, hey Lilith, York is tracking us. We have to do something. And that right there is the last we see of Atlas. Now, what are they going to do? I could see this going a couple of different ways. I could see Atlas and Lilith going the opposite direction, parting ways with the Straw Hats so that they could escape safely. Or I could see Atlas and Lilith working together to take down York once and for all. I feel like that would be the simplest option, and it might even be the best option, because when you really think about it, if York does fall into the hands of the Gorosei like they all planned, then that means that the world government will continue to produce the Mother Flame, thus giving them the ability to destroy more islands. You know, having York with the Celestial Dragons is not good for anybody. So if Atlas and Lilith were to go and take her down, not only would the Straw Hats be able to escape safely since they can't track them anymore, but we would also end up majorly damaging the world government's attack power. So I think that would be the best route. Granted, I don't know how they're going to do it. Last we saw, York was on the Labo phase, right? You know, for Lilith can simply hop off the ship and just walk over to York, but for Atlas, you know, you're gonna have to like fly all the way up there, find the rocket shuttle. Like, it's not really easy for Atlas to do that. But then again, there is also a chance that they are planning something entirely different. We don't exactly know how York is tracking them. Are all the Vegapunks, you know, connected via some GPS chip, or is it because of Punk Records? If it's because of Punk Records, maybe they go off and they destroy it. You know, maybe they, you know, lobotomize it a little bit so that York can't follow them. I do hope that at least one Vegapunk makes it out of here alive and safely, right? Because Luffy promised Vegapunk that he would take him off the island. The promise ain't looking too good right now. This might be one of the first times in the entire series where Luffy's promise hasn't been exactly fulfilled. So with that context in mind, I really do want someone from the Vegapunks to live. Then again, I guess we do have the Stella body, so maybe there's a way to bring him back, but maybe that'll be too OP, right? You know, if we brought back the Stella body, would that be too big of an asset to have on our side? I don't know. I feel like this could go a lot of different ways, but I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this. What do you think about Luffy's promise to Vegapunk when it comes to keeping him safe? What do you think about Atlas, Lilith, and York? Do you think York is going to make it out all right? Do you think Atlas and Lilith will survive their mission, whatever it may be? I would love to hear all of your thoughts down below. But also, one last thing I want to say though, but taking down York is probably going to be really easy. Right? Like, when you really think about it, you know, you put York in a ring versus Atlas and Lilith, I don't think York is walking out of there, right? York is only known for eating food and being bad. Lilith is evil. Lilith has the bubble gun. Atlas is violence, right? When Atlas first showed up here on Egghead Island, boom, over here uppercutting dinosaurs, man. So yeah, if they do run the fight against York, I do think our girls on the Straw Hat side will definitely take the W. So the next thing we see in this chapter is the ancient giant robot and the transponder Dendenmushi. So they both actually get back up on their feet, and I think it's pretty funny seeing the robot just chilling underwater. You know, like last chapter, he was like, oh, Joy Boy, it's here, you're here, you know, this is strange. And then in this chapter, he's like standing upright, just waiting to jump out. But yeah, now that he is back up and operating once again, the Dendenmushi follows suit, and it starts playing Vegapunk's message once more. And this time around, we don't get anything super insightful to our knowledge. So Vegapunk goes on, he's like, hey, you know, the will of D, you know, it's passed down. Hopefully this message reaches those of you who have it. And that's pretty much it. You know, it doesn't really help us too much in regards to last week and the week prior's message, where he said, hey, D-Clan, among you there is blank, the name is blank. If you have the will, hopefully you heard this message. You know what I mean? Like, we don't really know what he's trying to get at here. But funny enough, this does remind me of Whitebeard's speech at Marineford when he was talking about inheritors of the will of D and how Teach is not the one Roger is waiting for. Maybe Vegapunk was going to reiterate that message, but I'm not too sure how I feel about that, because that right there is something that we, the audience, already know about, and something that the world of One Piece already knows about. So I feel like whatever Vegapunk was going to say here would have blown our socks off. But because we're only getting the butt end of the Will of D message, it doesn't seem that crazy at first glance. And it does make me wonder if we'll ever hear the full message without the interruptions. And that's kind of weird, right? Because when you think about it, everything prior and everything leading up to this, whenever there's a mystery placed in front of us, we'll solve it. But when it comes to Vegapunk's message, it's like, yo, he's dead. You know, like, is he going to come back to life and tell us the rest of the message in person? Or is this something we'll hear about from the satellites? Or will we just, you know, get the context clues and we'll be able to piece it together once we learn more about the Will of D? I feel like this message is really strange, and I'm kind of curious to see how Oda is going to play off with this one. But yes, while this message is going on, we do get more reactions from around the world, and we get one of the most fan favorite characters out there, Katakuri, over on Whole Cake Island. And we see that he has indeed 100% recovered from his battle against Luffy and his battle against Germa and Caesar Clown. Funny enough, we actually don't see Oven in this chapter. And the reason I say that's funny is because in the Germa cover page story, Katakuri was fighting Oven. So it's like, yo, is Oven in the hospital? Is he just not here right now? You know, what happened to Oven, brother? Outside of that, though, I think it is kind of fascinating that Oda brought us over to Whole Cake Island. This is an island that you would think that would be in turmoil based on what happened to Big Mom. You know, are they not looking for Big Mom? Is Big Mom already back? Is Pero Sparrow back? Is Smoothie back? Like, we don't really know what is going on with their crew right now. We see more of Vivi and Big News Morgans in this chapter, and they are rightfully shocked that the message is back. And then we also get a reaction that isn't a reaction. You know, at the end of this page, you actually see Gaimon and Sarfunkel just chilling on their island, you know, the island of wild beasts. And they have no idea what's happening. You know, they don't hear the message. They don't have Denden Mushis over there. So it's like, Oda, why are we getting reactions from Reaction Piece when they're not reacting? You know, it looks like Oda just wanted to bring them back. And funny enough, this does remind me of an old Oda interview where he talked about some of his favorite characters in the series. And the first favorite character he mentioned was Buggy the Clown, but after Buggy, he later changed his answer to Gaimon. So yeah, it makes sense why Oda brought him back in here, and it's nice seeing Gaimon is happy, right? Gaimon and his little girlfriend, wife, barrel person, they're having a good time. I kind of wish we got to see some of their insight as far as the rising waters go, though. Because, you know, their island isn't exactly high on elevation, so if the water levels rise a little bit, you know, like, I'm kind of worried for these guys. They can't swim, you know, like, can they float? I don't know, but, you know, shout outs to Gaimon, though, you know, shout outs to Gaimon. So, going back to Egghead Island, though, York contacts the Gorosei and say, hey, geezers. Well, she doesn't say geezers, I said that, but hey, Gorosei, if you want to stop this Denden Mushi, if you want to stop the transmission, you have to kill the snail. You know, you can't simply knock it out or anything like that. You have to kill it. This distinction right here, in my opinion, is really, really important. Because last chapter, I was like, hey, like, you know, I'm worried for Zoro and Jinbei. You know, like, will they be able to escape Venus? I don't know. You know, what about Saturn? If he goes after Nami's group, that's going to be really bad. But now that York is diverting all of the Gorosei's attention over to the ancient robot, I could see things changing up a little bit. You know, I could see Venus saying, hey, as much as I would like to fight Zoro and get his Kitetsu, I gotta stop this broadcast. You know, Vegapunk is still talking. We gotta put this guy down. Same with Saturn. You know, back when York told him about the Denden Mushi being inside the robot, 4 out of 5 Gorosei showed up. Now that York is bringing it back, you know, we're getting round 2 of the ancient robot, I could see all 5 of them showing back up, thus giving the Straw Hats ample time to escape Egghead Island. And hey, if the Gorosei all indeed go downstairs to fight that robot, York will be unguarded, right? Because right now, if the Straw Hats or Atlas and Lilith fought York, Saturn should be nearby, Venus should be nearby. But right now, though, right now, if they all leave, then York will be up on the Labo phase by themselves. So I feel like, this could backfire on her a little bit. So I am interested to see how that is going to play out. So going back down to Luffy, though, we see that over on the northeast coast, Cypher Pole agents in Seraphim are falling from the sky. I know this is going to be a ridiculous comparison, but the panel where they're falling does remind me of Marineford, where, Luffy and the impaled down prisoners are coming down. That's kind of what it's reminding me of here. But instead of them all having cool entrances, the Cypher Pole agents are like, hey guys, you gotta catch us, if we hit the ground, we're going to die. Which is honestly quite funny because in the very next panel, you can actually see the Marines all rushing over to save the Cypher Pole agents. And, as far as Jupiter goes, he could have easily just, opened his mouth and shot them off on the coast, maybe even in the water. But no, the guy just decides to become a water fountain and spray them in the air, thus almost killing a lot of them. I don't know if they should be thankful to Jupiter or if they should curse Jupiter. But yeah, either way though, Jupiter brought the Cypher Pole agents and Seraphim back into play. And I think this is going to backfire. Because when you think about the Cypher Pole agents, excluding Cypher Pole Zero, of course, but the other Cypher Pole agents are all friends of Luffy. They all owe him a great debt because the Straw Hats are the ones who saved them from their imprisonment, right? Because York locked them up in a little room for months on end without any food whatsoever. Luffy broke them out of that, and he also gave them food. So I wouldn't be surprised if these Cypher Pole agents sabotage a little bit or don't play along with the Gorosei. Will they make it obvious? No. I don't think so. I don't think they're going to be openly defiant and tell Saturn and Jupiter no, but I can see them pretending like they can't capture the Straw Hats. We've seen Marines do this before. It happens in almost every single arc where Marines are chasing Luffy, and Luffy is such a good guy that the Marines are like, oh, there goes the Straw Hats. It happened back at Enies Lobby. Well, not Enies Lobby. It happened back at Water 7 with Garp's group. It happened at Dressrosa. It's happened with Smoker before. Like, I wouldn't be shocked. I would not be shocked if the Cypher Pole agents also come to that side and let Luffy get away to repay their debt. And of course, Jupiter almost killed him in this chapter, right? Jupiter just shot him in the air, so I'd also be pretty upset in that regard too. So now, the Seraphim, they're also being released along with the agents, and they're still trapped inside of their bubbles. And this is kind of why I was wondering earlier how Stussy released Kaku from his bubble, because we don't know about these guys. Can Marines release them? Will the Gorosei release them, or will they simply sit on the sidelines while this battle is going down? Not exactly sure, but the Seraphim are another faction that I could see being on our side. It's kind of 50-50 when you think about it, because if they do end up following the instincts of the warlords, then the Boa Hancock Seraphim is not going to attack Luffy. That's just how it is, right? The Kuma Seraphim is not going to attack Bonney. The Jinbei Seraphim probably would. The Mihawk one would definitely attack them. But yeah, that is like a 50-50 battle. We'd have two Seraphim on our side and the two Seraphim fighting for the enemy team. And then even then, people are still debating whether or not Bonney has control over these Seraphim. Personally, I don't think so. If she did, I would say it's just the Kuma Seraphim. But as far as the other three go, I don't believe she has that control. But yeah, I feel like the Seraphim and the Cypher Pole agents being on this battlefield will most likely end up as a negative for the Gorosei. But of course, those are just my thoughts. If you guys have any different opinions that you want to throw out there, please let me know down below. I'm pretty open-minded on most concepts and most things. So, if you guys are like, hey, sorry, forgot about this panel where this guy really hates Luffy, I'd be like, oh, snaps, you're right. Maybe the Cypher Pole agents are going to kill him. But yeah, the next thing we get, and I guess the final thing we get, is Jupiter and Warcury's attack on the giant ship. Jupiter, as we talked about last week, ends up sucking the ship backwards. That's all he's good for, just sucking and sucking. And Luffy's like, hey, quit that. Hey, Worm, stop that right there. So Luffy runs off to him, hits him in the mouth, and that's all we see from him. Dude, Jupiter's so funny. We see Jupiter, he sucks, Luffy hits him, and then he's gone for like 3 chapters. So I'm kind of curious to see if Jupiter's going to whip something out new next chapter. I kind of hope he does. I think a half man, half worm hybrid would go really hard. So I hope we see a hybrid form pretty soon, but that is yet to be seen. Outside of Jupiter, though, the next thing we get is Warcury attacking the giant ship. And he is such a threat to our group right now that Luffy says, hey, this guy's head is really tough. Be careful. And Dory and Brogy say, hey, we can't do anything. Let's just set sail ASAP. You know, Warcury is that big of a threat. But do you guys know who he's not a threat for? My man, my favorite character in One Piece, the ancient robot Emeth. Yes, the ancient robot man jumping out of the water and smacking that boar in the teeth. It's so cool, dude. The ancient robot in that last page knocks Warcury back and breaks his tusk or fang or whatever you want to call it. And you see the white of his eyes for the very first time. This is something that Dory and Brogy together couldn't do. This is something that Luffy's Gear 3rd Red Rock couldn't do. This is something that Luffy's Gear 5th could not do. The ancient robot did this with ease. And, you know, this is a silly thing to mention, but it's not even a named attack. You know, like, when it comes to that ancient robot, this is just a regular punch. Yeah, like, damn. Yeah. It's pretty insane. And one thing to make note of as well is that there's no haki behind it. No haki behind that punch whatsoever. No blackened fist, no lightning, no crackling sound effect. No. This is just a robot punch. And now, brother, I am just excited for the next chapter because I could see this going one of two ways. One, Warcury comes back, he regenerates, and then he fights the robot one more time. Or two, there does exist a reality where Warcury does not recover. Do you know how crazy that would be? Maybe we get that. You know, maybe we get a hint as to how to damage these guys permanently. I think that would be pretty dang awesome. You know, just going to the next arc and Luffy's like, hey guys, we couldn't hurt him, but that robot could. Maybe we should take some notes, boys. But yeah, Emeth the robot has now finally arrived on the battlefield, and with him we also got one of our very first dialogue from Joy Boy himself. And Joy Boy talks to Emeth and says, hey, when the time is here, you need to ... Even though we don't get the full sentence from Joy Boy right there, I think we can all assume what he was going to say, right? Hey, when the time comes, you need to beat the Gorosei. Or hey, when the time comes, you need to protect the next Sun God Nika, protect the D-Clan, protect the Wills from 900 years ago. You know, there's so many ways you could spin this, but at the end of the day, I think we can all come together and say that Joy Boy wants Emeth to be a good guy, you know, like it's as simple as that. But yeah, the name Emeth also goes pretty dang hard as well. And there's a lot of things I want to talk about with the Emeth name. First off, a lot of people mentioned this in the last few videos, but Emeth, here, I'm gonna read it right here. I pulled up the article so I don't mess up anything when it comes to this. But Emeth in Hebrew actually means truth, firmness, and veracity, which would go really well with the ancient robot that came from 200 years ago, because inside of that ancient robot lies the Denden Mushi that is spreading Vegapunk's truth, the truth of the world, if you would. Another cool thing about the name Emeth is that in Jewish mythology, that is also the word that brings life to a golem. And it's like, yo, you know, the ancient robot came to life and he's kind of like a golem. So yeah, I feel like Oda is firing from all cylinders when it comes to this name, and something really cool that we can also spin out of this name could be the names of other people from the ancient kingdom, because we do have to remember that whenever we hit a brand new country in One Piece, if there is a real life thematic there, all the names follow suit. Dressrosa, Spain, all have Spanish names. Wano, Japan, Japanese names, you know. Elbaf, Norse names. Now that we have Emeth coming from, I believe, Hebrew, I wouldn't be surprised if we get more of those names, or maybe even a spin on just old names in general. Oda, by dropping the name Emeth, could be hinting at that as well. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool takeaways here. And the last couple of things I want to end off on is the fact that the editor's note says that romance has started up again. And, you know, of course, you know, this ties all the way back to chapter 1 of One Piece called The Romance Dawn. and how they use Dawn synonymous with adventure. And then going back to when Franky learned a little bit about the Void Century from Shaka, Franky said it was a romantic adventure, a romantic tale. So yeah, there's something here with romance, man. And of course, you know, with romance comes the Dawn. And if that ends up being what the D stands for in the Will of D, I don't think that'd be too shocking. All right, so now the last few things I do want to talk about, but I do want to bring back up just how strong this ancient robot is. Because the way I'm seeing it right now is that if this is how strong the ancient robot is, and if this is how strong Zunisha is, because we saw that back in Zoe, then just how strong he's Joy Boy, right? Because like Joy Boy is their captain. This robot is like their version of Franky. Zunisha is like their version of Chopper. And we know how big the distance is between Chopper and Franky when compared to Luffy. So it's like, damn, dude, like if the robot is doing this much work, then Joy Boy, you know, like Joy Boy is going to be a freaking monster by the time we see him. Which I guess isn't surprising, right? You know, when people think of Joy Boy, they do imagine him to be like the strongest character out there. But I think this just kind of brings it back. Like, yo, like the robot is putting in work over here, one-tapping it, not one-tapping it, Gorosei, but you're knocking him back, dude. Yeah, it's pretty insane to think about. And another thing I want to bring up now is a question to you guys. But do you think this robot will make it off the island? Yes or no? Because now that York essentially put a hit out on this robot and the Den Mushi, I do feel like all of the Gorosei once again are going to team up against the robot, against Emeth. And if that happens, I don't know if he's going to make it out. Personally, I hope he does. I hope he travels with us to Elbaf so that he can tell us about Joy Boy, so that he can tell us about the Will of D and everything else. But there also exists a scenario where the Gorosei are able to take the robot down or, you know, hold him back here on Egghead Island. But yeah, either way though, I do think this robot is going to be a key reason as to why the Straw Hats escape. Because this robot is no joke. You know, like, you can't exactly fight the robot and destroy the Den Mushi and capture the Straw Hats at the same time. You know, you have to pick one or the other, and the robot's not giving you much of a choice. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the chapter, you guys. Let me know what you think about this down below. You know, of course, this was a short 13-page chapter. We got another one back to back. But hey, I'm not complaining. I think this is a pretty good, solid sample. We got some good fighting here and there. Got some good reactions from Reaction Piece. And yeah, with that being said, man, let me know all those thoughts. I would love to hear them. And I'll catch you guys in 2 weeks when One Piece comes back. Peace out, y'all.